If you want my thoughts on Series 12 in a slightly more timely fashion than usual, I've started doing Doctor Who live streams with JXE over on his channel. Streams go live on his main channel and then archived on his second. Also, I recently featured in an edition of the Tharies podcast, where he talks to YouTubers about their history, with a particular focus on their Doctor Who fandom. All links to these in the description. At first, I didn't really want to do reviews of Doctor Who Series 12. It's kind of an understatement that Series 11 didn't do much for me, because it did even less than that. It made me stop caring. But then, something happened. Series 12 premiered, and I didn't bother watching it on broadcast because, as said, stopped caring. But then I started getting messages from people and seeing this general opinion forming online that it's a slight return to form and that I should check it out. Because honestly, Stuart, it's better than Series 11 and a sign of growing and learning from past mistakes, and oh, for God's sake, it's happening again, isn't it? Listen, I love Doctor Who, I really, really do. It's been this comforting, constant thing in my life through some dark times, but I thought that my not really being a fan of this era at all meant that it was time for me to start moving on with my life, and that it will just be something I can come back to in time. But no, I'm trapped in this cycle. This has happened before. It happened with the end of Season 8. I reached peak Doctor Who, was unimpressed with the direction it was headed in, close to just calling time on my obsession with it, and then Series 9 started. I didn't watch it at the time, and started seeing reactions from people getting far too overexcited at Magician's Apprentice. Oh my god, it's a return to form. We see a young Davros in this one. Nostalgia bait. It's actually good again, Stuart. Watch it. And curiosity got the better of me back then, and I got suckered in again. And it was the same deal with Spyfall. I didn't feel like watching it at all, then I get told it's a return to form. The Master comes back in this one, you might actually like it this time, Stuart. And even though my mouth was saying, oh, they're just pulling the same cheap tricks and nostalgia baiting for the billionth fucking time, it's probably going to end up being just as dull and uninteresting as I expect it to be. But after about 10 days of me digging my heels in and stubbornly refusing to watch it, my curiosity got the better of me again, because the voice in the back of my head was just going, go on, Stuart. Watch Doctor Who. Make your He Who Moans videos. This is all you are and all you'll ever be. Okay, fuck it. Okay, Doctor Who content. Right, so, Spyfall. My opinion. Oh shit, it's actually really good and somehow made me care again. Spyfall really had its work cut out for it for me, and while it's nowhere near classic territory, it did enough to get me excited to watch Doctor Who again, and I could not be happier about that. It's a strange mix of Russell's big bombastic style of Doctor Who and Steven's more intricate, complex and bizarre approach to plotting. Before it came out, they were telling us that it was the biggest episode in the series' history, which sounds like hollow spin, and that's what I took it as, but big is an appropriate word to use to describe Spyfall, because the story has a large scope, wide cast of characters, and variety of settings, and it feels properly global. Anyway, so the plot is the Doctor and the companions investigate a recent spate of vanishing MI6 spies in relation to mysterious sinister light beings and a shady technology company called Vor. And this is another reason why the episode had extra work cut out for it for me to take it in any way seriously, because in case you're unaware, Vor, as in V-O-R-E, but pronounced the same as the company, is a sexual fetish that involves fantasizing about being eaten alive or eating someone or something else alive. And Spyfall does do a decent enough job to get me to forget that a key fixture of its plot is named after a fetish like that, because I did forget the connotations that Vor has after a while as I got suckered into the narrative. Although next time, Chris, when you're naming things in your episode, just a suggestion, try googling it with the safe search off, just to check that you haven't accidentally named it after something very not safe for work. Oh, and the episode also annoyed me by introducing Stephen Fry as a guest character, who's always wonderful, but then it killed him off about 10 minutes in. Like, what the fuck was that about, Chris? So yeah, Series 11 baggage, Vor, and a dead Stephen Fry. Spyfall had a massive uphill battle to get me to like it, and strangely the light beings managed to achieve that on their own. I fucking loved the Kazavan. The designs are so cool and mysterious. They're kind of like the ghosts from Army of Ghosts, extra reminiscent of that episode given there's a classic Who villain lurking behind them, but I just love the design and the sinister, threatening voice. They have this Lovecraftian aura of being beyond your universe and beyond your comprehension, something that Russell's era of Doctor Who used to do all the time, and that I have really missed. They're not overly original, I'll admit. That and their ultimate plan basically makes them just the Gelth from The Unquiet Dead, and I'm not quite sure why I love them so much. I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm tired all the time and enjoy looking at sparkly lights. But yeah, I thought the Kasavan were wonderful. The visuals are pretty impressive all round, actually. I love the weird, surreal, interdimensional landscape that the Doctor gets trapped in at the start of Part 2. I really love it when Doctor Who does some bizarre, surreal landscapes. It was one of the reasons I loved Heaven Sent so much. And even if it's only like a 10-minute sequence, I'll take it for what it is. That's 3 reference points so far. Army of Ghosts, Unquiet Dead, and Heaven Sent. And there was that bit where the Doctor gets Ryan, Graham and Yaz out of the plane crash by appearing on screen as a recording and appearing to speak to them in the present from a recording in the past, which is what happened in that famous scene in Blink. Oh, and that bit with the killer satnav at the start is a nice idea, but it's basically taken right out of the Centauran stratagem. And the big reveal at the end of Part 1 is that an incidental character who seemed nice this whole time turned out to be the Master, like in Utopia, and there was that bit where Barton's giving the companions a threatening phone call which feels like it's straight out of Sound of Drums, and... Wait a second, wait, there's almost nothing original in this episode at all, is there? Spyfall's kind of a jumble of everything. It's like Chris's aim was to remake almost every episode post Curse of Fatal Death all at once. Okay, yes, not all of course, but it's probably easier to start listing episodes that Spyfall wasn't cribbing from than ones that it was. There are some notably absent reference points. For example, I'd think that Chris was off his tits if he tried to bring back the love spaceship from Fear Her or the dickhead monster from Evolution of the Daleks. At least his reference points are from episodes that were actually decent. And here's the thing, you could brush this off as, oh, he accidentally came up with something that was quite similar. Doctor Who has been around for a while and pretty much done everything, but there's so many of these reference points, and this doesn't typically happen with other episodes, that I don't think it's a coincidence. I think this is a deliberate attempt to mash together stuff that's worked before, because fitting his writing around stuff that's worked in the past is a trait that I've observed as I've analysed Chris's past work. Thing is though, in spite of Spyfall just being a patchwork of ideas that we've seen before, I did still have a lot of fun with it. I suppose the difference between this and Series 11 was that Series 11 was just flat formulas that I've seen before, whereas this was big interesting ideas that I've seen before, and I'm more into Doctor Who for the big interesting ideas than the formulas. So Spyfall kinda works for me on that level. It's kind of a best of Doctor Who. The only thing it really did that was any different or unexpected was that Lenny Henry's Barton character, who is wonderful for the record, didn't turn out to be the Master, because it was heavily suggested that he was throughout. Barton is the sort of personality that the Master would take on. They did the heavy misdirection with him, and I might have been fooled and then surprised when I found out that he wasn't the Master if I hadn't watched this well after the fact and hadn't had it spoiled by Twitter. Then I guess it would be unfair of me to suggest that Spyfall doesn't bring anything new to the table for the show going forward, because it's finally got me to start warming to the companions, 13 herself, and introduced a decent new casting of the Master. Starting with the companions, Yaz surprisingly steals this one for me. I know Chris's Doctor Who gets accused of being preachy and basically a lecturer all the time, but I surprisingly enjoyed the scene where Yaz and Ryan managed to make their way into Barton's office under the guise of journalism, and she's interviewing this shady character accused of misusing data, and she decides to speak up about it to this Mark Zuckerberg stand-in character and introduce our real-world satire parallel thing. I think it's more Mandip Gill than the dialogue itself that really sells the theme of Spyfall to me. She just seems to be relishing the fact she's actually been given something to do for a change. Even if that thing is basically just spell out our theme to the viewers because we're too concerned that our audience might be too thick to get it. It kind of says a lot about how much Ryan and Yaz improved in this episode that Bradley Walsh felt like he was just sort of there, rather than being this eyeball-drawing light entertainment stunt casting who was kind of the shining beacon of hope last season. The improvement of these two is mild, but it was enough to get me to warm to them a bit more. In fact, it kind of annoyed me when Part 2 substitutes more Ryan, Yaz and Graham stuff for two new incidental characters added into the mix, historical figure duo of Ada Lovelace and Noor Inayat Khan. And Chris kinda has to do the, by this point traditional, copy and paste the introductory paragraphs from Wikipedia about these famous historical figures directly into the script, because Doctor Who is a very educational show, there to teach people about facts. Oh my god, Ada Lovelace! Oh, I've heard of you! You're involved with Charles Babbage in the creation of the first computer. And also, you die at the age of 36 from uterine cancer. Oh, sorry, spoiler warning. Getting onto the Master, I do really like Sacha Dhawan in this role, even if the Master's inclusion in this episode at all kind of falls into my axis of being entirely composed of recycled elements to try and nostalgia bait me into liking it, which shamefully worked perfectly, yes. Then it's also really cool that Sacha previously portrayed the director of the very first Doctor Who serial, Waris Hussein, in An Adventure in Space and Time. That is a lovely little treat for fanboys like me, and the reason I bring it up is that this needs to be explained now. How is Waris Hussein secretly the Master? 4 box set spin-off series Big Finish, get on it, fill those gaps! But yeah, I really like Sacha in this role, and he just chews that scenery. He's very intimidating and growly, he's very over the top, but he's as hypnotic as the Master's supposed to be, and he's got a lovely evil grin to go with it as well. Oh, and I love that they brought back his shrinking trick. Then I really enjoyed this whole setup in part 2 where we've got the Doctor versus the Master running across different time periods. During which, Jodie's Doctor was finally given some edge. Okay, so the Master is posing as a Nazi officer, and not being your typical Aryan, is using a perception filter to get them to accept him. And at the end of their confrontation on the Eiffel Tower in this scene, the Doctor turns his perception filter off and basically throws the Master to the Nazis.
Face your perception filter. Very easy to jam. Now they'll see the real you. Good luck.
Yeah, this happened. And it's a fucking dangerous creative decision, ain't it? Did no one realise what she just did there when they were making this? I mean, whatever you think of this creative decision, it's definitively ended this period of me just seeing 13 as a quirky children's TV presenter and nothing more, cause... damn. This moment was fucking cold. I mean, my problem with 13 last season was that she was very bubbly and fun to watch, yes, but she was very one note, and you only ever really saw one side of her. But pitting her against the Master in this one, a character that she's got a lot of history with, in a dangerous situation, and getting Sacha's Master to give this gorgeously chilling monologue about the state that Gallifrey's in at the moment, and then doing this... Season 11 13th Doctor lacked edge, but I think this episode's finally given her some edge. And I thought that Jodie was great in this scene at the end where she revisits Gallifrey in response to Graham's demand for her to open up a bit more to her companions. I am starting to see cracks in the upbeat children's TV presenter demeanour, and I'm actually really interested to see where we go with her next. This could be some 7th Doctor-esque character development starting to come out if that fucking cold as shit moment was anything to go by. She's giving off the impression of being a bubbly children's TV presenter to hide a more sinister and manipulative nature. But at the same time, the darkness in this episode doesn't feel out of place in among the corny bits like the motorbike chase, the casino stuff, the crashing plane, and all these big dumb set pieces. It's very much written in the vein of Russell's Doctor Who, where it's got edge, but it strikes the right balance between being edgy and being corny and over the top. In fact, it's extremely reminiscent of the Russell era, right down to Sacha's Master being very much in the mould of the John Sim Master. It's very cartoony, you got the Master showing up all over time in different outfits, and Graham has laser shoes, and the joke is that he didn't read the instructions. Oh, and the sound of drums tapping got brought back, and there was a deadlock seal. Christ, I haven't heard those words in a while. Oh no, the magic wand is useless in this situation because of insert sci-fi word here. I suppose Spyfall is an example of Chris playing to his strengths. His strength is writing inside someone else's framework. He's more comfortable taking and recycling other people's stories into something functional than he is coming up with his own ideas, and while I'm usually unenthusiastic about that approach, Spyfall has managed to find the very specific circumstances where that approach works for me, because pretty much all of the ideas that I've mentioned so far were examples of why I liked New Who in the first place, and so I did have a lot of fun as a hardcore Doctor Who nerd playing Spot the Episode reference point. Oh, and I think I finally figured out who Chris Chibnall is now. He's the J.J. Abrams of Doctor Who, and Spyfall is his Force Awakens. It's built almost entirely off of nostalgia and throwbacks, and it's technically competent enough to tide over cynics like me and encourage us to give a decent-sized round of applause for the time being. Although I'd err on the side of caution in calling this a return to form on the whole though, cause that approach only works under very tenuous and specific circumstances. On a good day you could get lightning in a bottle, and on a bad day you could get an absolute piece of horseshit. If anything, I'm actually kind of resentful towards Spyfall, in spite of how fun it was, because it's made me care again, and it's made me realise that Chibnall's basically just pulling a J.J. Abrams. Don't make me care again, Chris, because if the way you write's entirely based on past experiences, then the finale's probably going to be a massive letdown. Because that's one of New Who's longest running trends by this point. Oh, but come on, the season finale's got to suck, Stuart, it's tradition. I suppose the one area it strays from the Russell mould in is the ending. A massive 2-hour story like this might once upon a time have ended with a 20-minute long overindulgent weeping session, but instead the end of Spyfall is a bit too blunt and conciliatory for my liking. So we've got our villain announcing his plan for basically the Gelth to come and take over people's bodies, and he underlines the episode's point about signing away your rights to shady corporations, which I agree with, and it's a prime subject for Doctor Who, but it's kind of just flat out said at random points in the episode, rather than being woven into the narrative in an effective way. And then the Doctor comes in and just saves the day, and that's it. I like the idea a lot, even if it is basically just a Gelth but with a technological twist to it, but a 2-hour long story to end so bluntly was just a bit of a damp squib for me. That although yes I was squeeing like a giddy fanboy at the end at the Gallifrey sequences, I am aware that by doing this and reintroducing the Timeless Child idea, it is essentially just setting up another mystery box, as if we needed more of them. Oh joy, I wonder what this is going to be. Is it Susan? Is it Omega? Omega! What if it's Omega? It's weird though, I am actually kind of interested in what the Timeless Child could turn out to be and where they're going with it. And as said, I'd be interested if we take 13 in a more 7th Doctor-ish direction. And the episode was just so warm, fuzzy, friendly and nostalgic and... Okay, I am aware that Spyfall is exactly what I thought it would be, and yes it is just pulling cheap tricks and nostalgia baiting me to get me to like it again, and yeah, it's not very good, and I'm trying to fight it, but the brainwashing's too strong, and Spyfall is really good. Chris Chibnall knows what he's doing. He has a really intricate plan for the series. Obey, consume, watch. Help me, please. I want to have standards again, but I just can't. Please help. Spyfall is good. Chibnall knows what he's doing. No.